everybody, it's been a minute since I posted about my Miata, and that's because unfortunately I blew it up at the end of summer. Here is one of the pistons. I was doing freeway pulls, doing back-to-back-to-back pulls on the freeway, and then I was down on power and blowing oil out of my tailpipe, and this is a blown or cracked piston skirt. And the reason this happened is because I previously overheated the engine a couple times, including in some of the other videos I showed where I blew a coolant hose off of my engine. So that overheating probably led to stresses in these piston skirts, and with boost and stress cycles, it just didn't hold up. Here's the engine that I have in it right now. This is just a temporary engine I got off Craigslist. I also deleted a lot of the evaporator stuff on this side of the engine because I'm not using any of it with the Mega Squirt. I started plugging a lot of the holes on the intake manifold with these little caps, and I'm seeing a little bit more pressure in the system, like one more PSI. So the system is definitely tighter than it was before. I relocated my catch cans and now I'm just venting both of them. I installed an oil cooler and the fog light hole, and I've never had any oil temperature problems, but I'm planning on tracking this thing, and I know it becomes a problem pretty quickly. The original block was not damaged when I blew the piston skirt. I bought Wiseco low compression pistons, Manley rods, all forged stuff. I had a shop look at everything. The block was fine. There was no damage. The crank was also fine. They did a hone on all four pistons. These are Wiseco pistons, Manley connecting rods, all forged stuff. They did a balance and a polish on the crank and all the other rotating components. And I'll just turn it for you so you can see the piston walls. They did a really good job. I think this is going to turn out well. They did a deck on the block as well. They didn't take off an appreciable amount of material, just enough to get it nice and smooth and clean it up. These freeze plugs, they did, and I epoxied them in because I don't want them blowing out and having another 2-second catastrophic engine failure on my hands. I also had the head off, and I decided to do SuperTech valve springs. I did the dual springs, and I think these are good to 9,000 RPM or so. Springs and the titanium retainers. It was an easy job. I used the Flying Miata tool. And the reason I did this is because with the additional torque of a modified engine, you can start to get valve flutter or valve float. And that's where the valves are out of sync with the engine as you're accelerating quicker than the OEM engine would accelerate with more torque. This is the fourth time I've blown it up. It apparently doesn't like 10 PSI on the road to 20 PSI. New engine time. Let's see if I can identify the problem here. I blew a chunk off the top of this piston, and obviously it's not gonna work too well with a big piece of metal missing out of it. But the cylinder walls look pretty good. Sorry, this was filmed a little bit out of order. The engine that I had in here, the junkyard engine, I finally blew it up. I was waiting for it to go. I think I was running it with a little bit too much ignition advance, and I ended up cracking a piston. It was an old motor with a lot of tired miles on it, but it gave me the excuse I needed to put in the engine that I built with forged internals, and I'll show you that now. So far, I put about 2,000 really hard miles on it. It's running really well, no blow-by, and I did a compression test on it. I'll show you that a little bit later in this video. Who do we got here? after running maybe 300 miles, really hard, wide open throttle pulls. Nothing in there, just a little bit of condensation. The piston rings tested at a little under 120 across the board, but they're all the same. These are low compression and they have pretty large ring gaps for the turbocharger boost that I plan on running. So I'm not surprised by this compression test. Here's the custom splitter I made. I made it out of birch and I forgot how many plies it is. I think it's like 8 plies or something. It's really strong. And I'm gonna post the CAD drawing for it on this video description, and you can download it and then just send it someplace. If you have access to a CNC router, you can get it cut out of birch or aluminum or whatever material you have. And yeah, it's super sturdy, and it's nice to cut it out of a CNC router because then it's dimensionally perfect. And it'd be really hard to make this kind of curvature by hand. And as you can see, I rounded the edge to make it more of an airfoil and reduce that aerodynamic drag. I custom made the brackets for the splitter. It's just an angle down here, an aluminum angle with a flat coming up into another piece of aluminum angle. And then I used rib nuts into the frame. That's a really big rib nut with a big bolt, and it's very sturdy. And then I also used the existing 10mm bolt that's coming off of the tubular frame and just put a nut there. And then on this side I did the same thing. And it fits fine, it fits around all my intercooler piping. And then I put these spats on here as well. These are custom, just bent stainless steel sheet metal. Give it the old obligatory pull-up, or 2 for good measure. This is a 9 Lifes Racing big wing, and the end plates are custom. I cut them out of a water jet. And there's 2 pieces of aluminum here. The one on the back I polished just where it shows through, and the one on the front has the cuts, and I just copied basically a Viper ACR. I'll post the drawings of these as well in the description of this video. You can download them, and if you have access to a water jet, you can cut them out yourself. These hood vents are Singular Motorsports, and they're actually for the rear of the hood. I just liked how they looked better on the front. They're bigger and thicker towards the rear, and I didn't mind removing a little bit more material out of my hood. And the back ones are from a BMW, and I got them off eBay based on just the dimensions that I wanted, and they look pretty good. And it gives some cross-flow airflow or heat transfer over the turbocharger. So air comes in the front, it passes by the whole turbocharger system, and then it ejects out here. And this is before the slightly higher pressure area of air right here on some CFD models that I've seen online. So there should still be some adequate extraction, and I can tell there is because when I'm driving the car, there's just heat billowing off here. These upper vents fit nearly perfectly in the NB hood underneath here, and it required very little trimming of the factory support, so the hood still remains really rigid. I highly recommend you get a full second gear pull-in.
Yeah, I will.
It'd be good for your health. Thanks for watching the video. As you can tell, I'm not at my garage right now. I'm actually working on a PhD. I'm almost done. It's in mechanical engineering, and it's related to the stuff that I do in my garage, the automotive stuff. So there's gonna be some synergy, and I'm gonna be posting some new content here real soon. One of the things I did is I expanded my garage, the shop that I work at, with custom trusses. It's a really cool custom expansion. So I'll be making a video about that. And regarding the Miata, after I blew it up a couple times, and maybe it was because of the ignition advance, and maybe it was some of my fault as well, I went down the rabbit hole of World War II era fighter planes and meth injection, water injection, and also nitrous, and realized that E85 is basically all those combined into basically one super fuel. If you don't know about it, research E85 and turbocharged engines. It's like a unicorn fuel for turbocharged cars. So I want to switch to E85 and maybe get my Miata up to around 300 wheel horsepower, and then install a roll cage and start to lighten some of the body panels. You can make 10-pound carbon fiber doors if you have a roll cage, and get the Miata under 2,000 pounds. So imagine 1,700 pounds and 300 wheel horsepower. The car would be an absolute rocket. And that's just a vision. I don't know if it's obtainable, but I want to move towards that. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing to my channel and hit that notification bell. Thank you so much for watching my video.